got to have to show Shay what's going on.
She can come. She's in Dade area, so.
Everybody knows when Derek's here, and actually Derek or Crystal is going to be here the 23rd. She said she would do the service the 23rd, so we always get a good turnout when we have a good speaker.
Well, in the hymnal, it's now the green.
All right. Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right. Welcome to First Universalist of New Madison on this beautiful, beautiful Easter Sunday. Do we have any announcements?
Just a quick announcement, Tim. Thank you to everyone contributing to our union service last week with El Dorado. The congregation, I know from there, certainly appreciated our hard work. And each of you, I can't thank you enough. And I thought maybe I might get some thank you notes out during the week, but I haven't. So I'm in church, so I'll thank you personally. And all those others that help too, that aren't here today, maybe with family or what have you. Your generous and willingness to share wonderful food, helping particularly in terms of prepping things and taking things back downstairs and clean up. Everybody pitched in, and I thought it was a most successful day. Particularly Paula Godsey, she's not here, but all the things she did to coordinate and arrange, not just for food, but the food list, the things that we needed for our table, and Roberta, they're setting on this beautiful table. Thank you for all of that. And I know that our El Dorado friends certainly appreciated it as well.
I thought we had a real good meal.
And they stayed a long time and seemed to enjoy conversation.
And I asked Kenny for his recipe.
Yes.
I brought copies of the recipe.
Thank you. Thank you.
So good, and it was different.
Yes. It was so easy.
We talked to Derek a little bit. We would like to continue our interaction with El Dorado. So we're going to try and do, instead of just a couple times a year, we're going to try and do at least 4 times a year, having a common meal and a common service. We looked at 4th of July, but 4th of July comes on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, so that's going to be kind of awkward. But we really don't have to have a holiday. We can just pick a day. So what we're going to try and do is pick a day at the beginning of the summer and one at the end of the summer. It'll be their turn to meet, and they didn't want to do the meet at the park, but I thought that really worked well. So we may twist their arm or plead with them to go ahead and have a park service. And then I think we have a park in New Madison. I think at the end of the summer we could have a park service here.
Well, we have a park in Greenville too.
Yeah.
Well, actually, yeah. Well, the thing is, I found people don't like to go anywhere. They don't like to drive. I had movie night at my cottage, and that's only at Wayne Lakes. That's only half the way to the Greenville. Nobody could come. When we had it at the church, we had a really good turnout, which is another announcement. I've renewed the Holocaust thing, so next Sunday we're going to do another episode, or maybe an episode and a half of the Holocaust. We aren't going to do this forever, but we had a good turnout and a good discussion the last time. So if people are interested, we will do the same thing again. This time, all the little treats, I'll have them labeled so you'll know what they are before you bite into them. It won't be the mystery anymore. But we'll do the same thing with treats, soda pop. If Chaz is here, we might even have beer. Okay, and I said Crystal will be here the 23rd. She does a really good job, and she picks everything. She does the whole service, so we don't know what that's going to be about yet, but I'm sure it'll be worth seeing. All right, our welcome is Easter Again by Linda Susan Ulrich. We live inside paradox. Humans generally don't like to admit it. We much prefer tidy, stable, comprehensible, logical ways of getting through the day, but paradox is woven into the fabric of this particular universe we inhabit. Light is both a particle and a wave. Imaginary numbers describe the math of physical phenomena. Love and grief are inextricably linked, as are rage and sorrow, suffering and compassion, life and death. Time itself is both linear and cyclical. Each person's life traces a single arc, yet patterns emerge and reemerge. Fear always seems to return. Goodness knows terror finds its way back into the news. We always seem in need of help to roll back big stones that block our way. Yet we also come back to the Alleluia, even if its absence has gone on far longer than the 40 days of Lent. We raise each other's spirits when our sacred places seem empty. We anoint each other. We engage in a demanding faith that asks us to love the next world into being today. We are joyful, though we have considered all the facts. We practice resurrection. It is Easter again, my friends, and you are surrounded by a multitude who wish you well. Our prelude is Now the Green Blade Riseth.
Yes, he told you the title is Now the Green Blade Rises. You can't sing it. And if you'll go to page 266 in your hymnal, you can follow the words of the music I'll be playing. Page 266.
266 in your hymnal, if you happen to have a hymnal at home. And we've mentioned this before, if you don't have a hymnal at home and would like to borrow one, you can more than welcome to come sign one out. We don't need all 40 of them here every Sunday. Now the green blade riseth. In the grave they laid him, love by hatred slain. Love is come again, like wheat that springeth green. And it truly is spring. Our chalice lighting for holy days on which we recall old stories by Dillman Baker Sorrells. For holy days on which we recall old stories, we light the flame. For Passover, which reminds us of the courage and strength of those seeking freedom. In the past, we light the flame. For Easter, which reminds us that love is our greatest challenge, we light the flame. For gathering today in this sacred space, we light the flame. For opportunity to be together as a community, to remember the past, to plan for our future, to be alive in our present. Our opening hymn, Lo, the Day of Days is Here, 269. Music thrills the atmosphere. Hallelujah. Isn't it the truth? All right. Our affirmation is an Easter meditation. You've probably noticed by now everything is Easter on Easter, so it's going to stay Easter as we go through. Easter for most people is bunnies and chocolate eggs and hiding eggs, so we're kind of combining Christianity with the cross and the bunnies. Affirmation and Easter Meditation by Sam Trumbore. Eternal Spirit, we witness bringing green growth, throwing out tiny tendrils, seeking support, sprouting thin twigs, reaching for the bright golden sun, guiding new tubers, seeking water in dark, sandy soil. Be in and amongst us this Easter morning. We gather this morning to celebrate the triumph of life over death. The body can be killed, but the spirit cannot be quenched. Only yesterday we had given up all hope of the promise of the coming divine realm, and today we are renewed and inspired as we realize it is now already here. This morning we remember that pain, suffering, and death are not ends, but can be scary underground passageways to more abundant life, if we have the courage to face our fear and crawl through, to be pushed and pulled by the mind-narrowing forces of lust, hate, and confusion. This morning we renew our dedication to act from our love rather than our fear. We renew our faith in the inherent dignity and worth of all humanity, including ourselves, which cannot be removed from anyone, and seek the nerve to face the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune which may come our way. In our moments of defeat and surrender, may we turn away from the paths of revenge, denial, and cynicism. May we remember the eternal truth spun into the web of life. Our wounds can become sacred incantational teaching of the wisdom embedded in the story of resurrection. Let us celebrate together this morning the one who never gives up, even in the darkest night of winter, our blue-green planet Earth, resurrected anew each spring. All right, our children's story is traditional for me every Easter. Number one, it comes from Germany, which I have an affection for, and number two, it tells a story.
Looking inside, trying to find something so small, it gets lost when left alone. I know they're not right, I've been here before. No matter what they say, I know that I'm worth more. But now and then, something tells me that I can't be me. Feel stronger when I stand up, show courage, not afraid. 'Cause I don't have to be this or that way. Someone who makes me perfect, who never needs to change. And I remember that I'm beautiful always.
Netto wishes you a happy Easter. And Netto is a grocery store in Germany, if you can believe that. And that's the kind of ads that you would get in Germany. Mingled, mixed families, children abused because of their difference, and yet community reigns supreme in the end. A happy Easter story. All right, joys and concerns. We always have our sunflowers for the Ukraine. Spring has come, the ground is dry, offensive actions are started, so either more people are being killed, no one sees an end yet, and no one has envisioned how the end is going to come, so we just have to keep our prayers and support for the people of the Ukraine and keep supporting the people of the Ukraine. Tornado survivors, nothing much in the news this week, but you know that didn't end because it left the news cycle. Tremendous devastation in Mississippi, actually in Indiana, all across the Midwest, and a little commentary from the weather people. Because of global warming, this is going to be an increased occurrence of bad weather, of stormy weather, of tornadoes. The seas are warming. The Gulf of Mexico is getting warmer. That puts more moisture into the atmosphere. That comes up north. The warmer atmosphere in the Arctic has destabilized the jet stream, so it's coming farther south. And when the moisture from the Gulf Coast meets the high winds and the jet stream from the Arctic, you get turbulent weather, which means tornadoes. And it's happening not just in Tornado Alley in Oklahoma. It's happening all over. Even had a tornado in Delaware, one in Rhode Island, damaging tornadoes, not just little wind sprints. So,
Tim,
yes,
I'm getting so concerned because we're right down the middle and there are tornadoes all around us.
yes. And I would certainly suggest if you do not have a tornado shelter in your house, that you think about preparing one. If you do not have a basement, which is the best place to go, you can reinforce a bathroom in the middle of the house that has small walls and is on the ground floor and in the middle of the house. I've actually considered going in and putting some 3/4 inch plywood on the inside of our downstairs master bathroom. It's right in the middle of the house. The closet in the bathroom is like 3 feet by 6 feet. It'd be a crowd to get everybody in there, which me and my wife and our dog and our cat. But you get in there and close the door, that's going to be as protected as you're going to be, unless you have a root cellar or because all we have is a crawl space, which I'd probably have to shoot my wife to get her into the crawl space. So. But that's something you need to be prepared for. If you live in a mobile home, you need to find where the nearest shelter is. A mobile home is, there's no point in ever staying in a mobile home. You're just like sitting out in the open air then. And that's something that the state or the federal government might help, is to build shelters in mobile home parks where people can go in case there is a storm. It wouldn't take much to make a reinforced concrete building that could be used for a community center or anything else. That may be something that people will start to talk about in the future, but I'm sure nobody will want to spend the money to do. South Carolina, did you see on the news? The latest, we just have to do a shooting, every week shooting. 6 kids shot on the beach at a senior day out of school. I don't think anybody's given us the details yet. All I do is say, the shooting this week is South Carolina, 6 kids shot on the beach. And then we go on to the next thing, hearts and minds, thoughts and prayers. And I want to do one for you in particular. I tried to get the film and I couldn't. So this is in North Dakota. The North Dakota Senate, which has a super Republican majority, did a vote this week. And let me play you the verbal part and then I'll explain it to you. Maybe. No, maybe it's not going to play. All right, and the vote was children. They had the Democrats in North Dakota had proposed raising the amount of money sent to children's meals at schools, K through 12. It's limited to 130% of the poverty level. In other words, whatever this federal poverty level is, if you make up to 130% more than that, or 30% more than the poverty level, you can get free meals. They wanted to raise it to 200% more. This gentleman, which I'll play it for you the next time I can figure out how to do it. As a good Republican said, it's not our responsibility, it's the family's responsibility to provide for their kids. And this is the interesting part, he said, even if the kids want to eat. Even if the kids want to eat. I'm not exactly sure what his understanding of that was. I'm thinking the only way I can rationally explain it is that he thought maybe they could bring their lunch instead of having to eat the school lunch. So if they want to eat the school lunch, it's the parents' responsibility to pay for it. But he said it's not the state's responsibility. And so they refused, they denied the passage of that bill. So the money to extend free meals to students up to 200% was denied. What made it particularly interesting and particularly galling was at the same time they raised the reimbursement rate for state employees, including senators as themselves, from $35 a day free food to $45 a day for free food for every senator and every state employee. So when you're traveling inside the state of North Dakota for the state on state business, the state will buy you $45 worth of free food. I don't know how expensive North Dakota is, but I could eat pretty good I could eat for a week on $45. I mean, you're talking $5 or $6 for breakfast, $6 or $7 for lunch, and $10 or $15 for dinner. That doesn't come any place close to $45. But the point is, and I wish I'll find it sometime so you can hear it, or I'll play it after church so you can hear it. This guy standing up there saying, you know, kids don't need the money, it's the parents' responsibility to feed them. This is what we run into. This is what we face in this country, is it's somebody else's responsibility, except when it involves me, then it's the state's responsibility when my hand is out. And just, all right, so there we go. Anything else? Let me go back to you.
Tim, let's light a candle for, Easter Sunday. We have beautiful spring sunshine flowing through our beautiful windows. As we look around, let's just light a candle for those who are no longer with us. They used to be here every Easter, and members and friends, we can all remember them with that candle, but also obviously any more ways in addition to that.
Yes, we'll light a candle for their resurrection. They may just be home in bed, but we can get them out of bed and get them to church.
We've got a long list of those that are no longer with us.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we may do that again. This year we had a service at the cemetery, and we may do that again on, I don't think it's called the Day of the Dead. It's May, whatever. We'll look it up.
Or we could do it on Memorial Day this year.
I think we did do it on Memorial Day, didn't we, last year?
Yes.
So we'll probably do that again this year. All right. Yes.
I think we ought to remember the legislature in Tennessee.
Ah, yes. Cut out of the same cloth as the legislature in North Dakota. I'm sure everybody knows that story. And that's one of the gun things from last week that we didn't talk about. The 6 people, the 3 kids, 9 years old, and the 3 adults who were killed at the Nashville school. The 2 representatives from Nashville were not allowed to speak. They cut off their microphones. They called them out of order. They protested and went to the floor of the Senate. Because they didn't have microphones, they used a little portable bullhorn to say that we, the legislature of Tennessee, need to support gun control. For that, they were expelled from the Tennessee legislature, thrown out of the legislature, denied their seat, and their voters are denied representation. Interestingly enough, there were 3 people in the well complaining. 2 were black gentlemen and 1 was a white lady. The 2 black gentlemen were expelled, and for some reason the white lady was allowed to stay.
Well, she wondered about that too.
She didn't actually wonder. She knows the answer, and I think we all know the answer. Yeah, I think we all know the answer. This is what the last 4 years or 6 years or whatever that the split in this country is coming to, is more and more people are more and more willing to say things and do things that used to be considered non-sayable and undoable. They're more willing to stand right up and take responsibility for it. Like the gentleman in South Dakota or North Dakota who said kids don't need to eat. I mean, it's the parents' responsibility. All right, I'm out of candles, but we'll write another figmentary candle for those thoughts and prayers, those hopes and desires, those fears and worries that people have that they're not able to share. If you do have those at home, if you happen to be watching on Facebook, do not hesitate to contact us by email, by letter, by whatever. We'd be glad to include you in our prayer chain. All right, our message is Easter. And actually, we kind of started out doing the classic Easter, and I ended up, where am I here? I ended up with going off on a different direction, kind of into redemption. What I began to consider was redemption and resurrection. What's the difference between redemption and resurrection? And we'll talk about that as we go along. Today is Easter Sunday, one of the highest Christian holy days. Basically this year there's a confluence of holy days because Passover, the Jewish Passover, is this week, and Ramadan is also this week, the Muslim holy high days. I guess I should have mentioned that in Joys and Concerns. Israel is having a terrible time now at the holiest site for the Jews and the Muslims in Jerusalem. The Muslims want to be in the church overnight to celebrate Ramadan, but the Jews do not want them in the church overnight. It's an abrogation of their agreement to keep the site kind of neutral with nobody taking over. The first night they were there, the Jewish police went in and actually were unfortunately filmed, unfortunate for Israel, were filmed beating the worshipers in the dark. So that's caused all kinds of problems. Now there's rockets flying back and forth. There's Israeli air raids. The Middle East tensions are heating up. It's looking worse and worse. For those people who predicted Armageddon, the end of the world, looks like their predictions are actually coming closer. All right, we've passed. Easter is named for Esther, a Germanic goddess of the East and springtime. As we know, most Christian holidays are not only named for previous pagan holidays to assimilate the people who were pagans and became Christians, sometimes involuntarily. They also went to the time of year that they were. Christ was probably not born in December, but because the holiday for the pagans was in December, the equinox, his birth date became that time too. We passed the vernal equinox, which is spring, and entered into spring. We see flowers in bloom, daffodils and forsythia. The buds in the trees are getting ready to open, and the birds are already singing. It is indeed a season of resurrection. All right, the one thing I wanted to do, we talked last week with Derek. We're going to kind of backtrack a little bit. And he talked about the procession into Jerusalem with Jesus and the donkey or the colt, depending on which version you read. I talked to Tara about this, and she pointed me towards some literature. This, if you can see it, is a depiction of a Roman general, which Pontius Pilate was a Roman general appointed to rule Jerusalem and rule Israel. It turns out that Christ came into Jerusalem on the donkey from the east side of Jerusalem. At the exact same time, Pontius Pilate was entering the town from the west side with a military parade. Christ came as a parody of the military, riding a donkey, putting palm fronds down. Pontius Pilate came in showing all the might of the military with Roman soldiers, with drums, with the parade, the horses, the military, the armor, the whole thing intended to impress the people of Jerusalem. Interestingly enough, the crowd that greeted Jesus was the crowd that looked for the new king of the Jews, someone to free them from the yoke of Roman oppression. The crowd that greeted Pontius Pilate was the more conservative, we like order, we like military control, we like the pomp and circumstance, we like this guy because he's our friend and he helps us. You might actually put in there the Sadducees and the Pharisees. And there's two different crowds, as Tara explained it to me. When we asked the question last week, how did this go from the crowd that greeted Jesus to go to the trial when the crowd said, give us Barabbas and execute Jesus? How did those same people change like that? It's real possible they were not the same people. The people that greeted Jesus when he came to Jerusalem were not there during the trial. They were not there, and they did not ask for the death of Jesus. The crowd that greeted Pontius Pilate and were proud of the military display and proud of might makes right and nobody goes against the state, that was the crowd that asked for the freeing of Barabbas. I thought that was a kind of interesting sidelight. So anyway, there's a little picture and a little more education on that. All right, Christians say Jesus was crucified on Friday. Nobody's been able to explain to me why we call it Good Friday. I don't get it. Good Friday when Jesus was killed, and I have to find that yet. Rose from the dead on Easter Sunday. None of us go back in a time machine to see whether that really happened, and many people have opinions. Some are certain that, as Christians' creeds say, that Christ rose from the dead. Others are equally certain that dead people do not come back to life. A little side note, as a EMS person, a paramedic, I can tell you that sometimes dead people do come back to life. When somebody drowns in a lake or a river, particularly in the wintertime, the saying is, and the aphorism we follow, you're not dead until you're warm and dead. There have been multiple instances of particularly children who've been drowned for 30 or 40 minutes in a cold water environment, being brought back and put on resuscitation, taken to the hospital, and have regained consciousness and have been completely normal, no brain damage at all. The human body has something called the diving reflex, whereas as it begins to asphyxiate, feels water at the larynx, your epiglottis actually closes off and does not let water go into your lungs. So you basically go into a state of hibernation. Your body cools down, your body temperature can be down to as low as 70 or 80 degrees. And you can basically hibernate just like the bears hibernate in the wintertime and can be brought back to life. So I'm not saying that's what happened to the sense of Christ, because that was a completely different thing. But all I'm saying is science has told us that every time somebody says something can't happen, you have to say pretty much that's the case, but not always. So when Christ raised Lazarus from the dead, they said he'd been dead for 4 days. There's a question about that, but if it had been a short amount of time and he had an epileptic seizure and was paralyzed, there have been cases of actual latter-day people. I think it was only a couple months ago, some lady woke up in a coffin in the mortuary and was scratching on the lid, and they let her out. She was pronounced dead by a doctor because her pulse was so faint they couldn't feel it, and she was blue, and her breathing was so shallow they couldn't see it. So just a little sidelight there. I'm convinced that something has happened to the followers of Jesus. On Good Friday, he was dead, his disciples were in despair, and then by Sunday, something happened that completely changed their outlook. Was it a miracle? Another comment, Thomas Paine, one of our founding fathers, wrote that when a preacher mentions a miracle in order to prove something, it implies weakness in the thing that he's proving. In other words, miracles do not strengthen your choice. Did a miracle occur? In the ancient world, miracles were associated with all great men, including Pythagoras, Alexander the Great, Caesar, Moses, Buddha, and Muhammad. If you were great, you performed miracles. That's the way people thought in ancient times. That's the way people think today. You have to provide, you have to do miracles. Interestingly enough, resurrection is also part of the miracle. It wasn't just miracles, making water into wine, that type of thing. It was resurrection. Buddha, when he came out of India and heading into China, a sage or a philosopher met him on the road and talked to him and greeted him and said, I haven't seen you for a long time, etc., etc. And then he noticed that he only had one sandal on. And he said, why do you walk with only one sandal as you're going to China, a long journey? And Buddha said, go back to, I don't remember the name of the town, and ask the philosophers there, ask the religious people there why I only have one sandal. So Buddha continued on to China. This person continued on into India. When he came to the town Buddha had mentioned, he stopped at the religious temple and asked, what's the deal with Buddha? I saw him and he only had one sandal. And they said, you're a liar. Buddha died 3 months ago. You could not have seen Buddha. And he said, I swear that I saw the living flesh of Buddha. So they said, let's go open the tomb and see. So they opened the tomb, and what did they find? Only one sandal. The sandal he was missing was the only thing left in the tomb. So the Egyptians used Osiris. Osiris was the husband of the queen. He was killed by a rival, cut into small pieces and spread over the whole country of Egypt. The queen gathered up all the pieces, anointed them with oil and holy unguents, mummified him, wrapped him up in cloth. He came back to life, was resurrected, and that became the history, or that's the reason that the Egyptians followed the practice of mummification. Each of these people who was mummified thought they could be resurrected if their body was carefully soaked in oil and preserved and wrapped in cloth. They didn't do that just for a funeral rite. They did it because they expected to come back to life. That's why in the Egyptian tombs, there's food, there's articles of daily use, combs, weapons, whatever they might need. And unfortunately for the bystanders, their slaves or servants were also killed and mummified. And pretty interestingly enough, in Egypt, cats were considered a holy object, and they found numerous cats being mummified. Right, an Easter story is told in each of the 4 Gospels. The stories disagree on the details. How many people went to Jesus' tomb, who they were, whether they went before or after sunrise, whether they saw 1 angel or 2, whether they saw Jesus or not, who Jesus appeared to first. In one gospel, Mark 16:6-7, the angel tells Mary Magdalene that Jesus is not there. But in another gospel, John 20:14-18, Jesus is there at the tomb and he talks with Mary Magdalene. Thomas Paine, once again our founding father, said that if the 4 gospel writers testified in court and contradicted one another as much as they do in the Bible, all of their testimony would have been thrown out by the judge. These are our founding fathers who are quoted often saying this is a Christian nation. Our founding fathers did not say this is a Christian nation. They said it is a nation of laws, a nation of judgment, a nation of all the people, for all the people, even though at that time they didn't include black people as people. But maybe it doesn't matter or not whether they agree in the details. The 4 Gospels are not history, they are testimonies of faith. We call the Gospels Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, but we don't really know who the authors were or what their names were. The Gospels were written anonymously 35 to 60 years after Christ died by people who were not eyewitnesses. Before the Gospels were written, there was an earlier telling of the Easter story written to the church in Corinth. That was Paul's version in 1 Corinthians, the reading that we're kind of working with today. Paul's story is the first and the simplest. He never says the stone was rolled away or that the tomb was empty or even whether there was a tomb or a stone. His version has no angel who announces the resurrection. He merely says that Jesus died, was buried, was raised from the dead on the 3rd day, and that he appeared to Peter and to the 12 and to many others. That's all he wrote. He wrote that account about 20 years after Jesus died, and then next comes Mark's gospel about 40 years, and that story adds the angel, the empty tomb, the stone that was rolled away. The earliest copies of Mark end without Jesus making any resurrection appearances. Matthew and Luke tried to improve on Mark's gospel by adding resurrection appearances. And in John's gospel, written 60 or 70 years after the crucifixion, Jesus cooks breakfast and even appears from out of nowhere inside a locked room. That's John 20:19-29. So, like a fish story, the resurrection seems to grow as time passes. From Paul's simple explanation that he appeared to John's Jesus, who materializes and dematerializes in a locked room. But for now, let's put the various accounts of the resurrection to one side, because the stories can be truthful without always being completely factual. The stories can be truthful without being completely factual. A story or a parable can teach an important truth, even if the facts don't exactly happen the way they're portrayed. The miracle of Easter is that it is possible for a tragedy to become a triumph. What we would expect to be the end isn't the end. That's where we get into resurrection or redemption. My examples, The people I work with, or at least 4, and sometimes I think 5, are how do we do resurrection? How do we do redemption? These people all have had trouble with the law. They've all been arrested. They've all been to the judge. They've all been sentenced to do community service, or in the case of drunken driving, their license has been suspended. And what happens? They're caught driving on a suspended license. And they're sentenced to jail again, and they're let out on community service. Their license is canceled for even longer, and what happens? They're caught driving again on a suspended license. And that seems to be the problem with most of the people that I'm working with. Some of them are in jail every weekend. Some have to do like 5 days in a row in jail. Some have to do community service. What happens? They don't show up for their community service. Their jail time gets extended. Where does redemption, where does rebirth, where does reincarnation, where does this happen? How much effort can we put into trying to save the lost? Are they lost? Can they be redeemed? Can these people be saved? Can the poor parents in Dakota feed their children? It's their responsibility. What happens if they don't feed their children? Who is going to feed the children who can't eat, who have no food? Who is going to redeem the people who are roaming our streets without a driver's license? So far, none of them have been in an accident because 2 of them are borrowing my vehicles. So that's the question I have. I do not have an answer. I do not expect to give you an answer. I would ask your help as a community in forming an answer. And if that involves legal changes, if that involves, maybe I can get them to come to church. Who knows, that might work. Okay. Our job, or what we need to do, is not convince people that a resurrection happened, but to remind you that it happens. Each and every one of us in this room is proof of the positive effect of resurrection. Who among us does not have a story to tell, a personal story of emerging from a tomb of depression, despair, pain, or addiction? Who among us can't point to a time in our lives when all seemed lost and suddenly hope returned? You are the witness to your very own resurrection. What other proof do you need? That is our answer. That is, I think, where we have to go. We can debate what happened on that first Easter. We can't test it in a laboratory. Resurrection isn't a scientific proposition. It's an experience. Good Friday isn't the end of the story. Winter isn't the end of the story. Spring is in the air. All of our senses can testify to that fact. The birds are on the wing. Daffodils and forsythia are blooming. Children in some church are singing. So go forth and be agents of resurrection. Do not give up on those who seem to be lost. I still have hope they can all be raised from they're not dead, but from whatever pit they're in. All right, questions, comments? And let's see.
Principles that the Republican Party stands on. Yes, I can understand kids going hungry, but is that really the problem of the school district? Is that the problem of the state of North Dakota? It's really the problem of parents being negligent with their kids if their kids are choosing to eat in the first place, which is entirely the problem that could be existing here. I don't believe that it is our responsibility to carry on a program in excess of what the federal government already does. Where does it stop?
With the legislature.
Where does it stop? Where does it start? Where does responsibility for someone else start?
It stops when the legislature doesn't cut.
And these people go to church every Sunday. I'm sure they're in church on Easter morning, probably were there at dawn, considering that they're probably conservative Christians. Probably had a communal meal, probably put money in the plate to help fund the church, to help fund the church's, the good deeds of the church. And I'm sure the church does good deeds. And I'm sure that if those hungry kids went to the church and asked for food, they would give them food. So what is it that stops them from being as a state representative, as a representative of all of us, many of us who want to share our food and our money with the poor, and that's the personal responsibility. They cannot get past the fact that I worked hard for everything I've got, and if you don't work hard, you don't deserve to have anything. And that's one thing to say to the parents, and I guess I can't begrudge them that. If the parents won't work, then don't give them a Cadillac or a cell phone. But don't punish the kids because they were unfortunate enough to have those kind of parents. It's not the kids' fault. So, all right, I was glad that showed up. Okay, where are we? And that gentleman is a nice-looking suit and tie. I'm sure he loves his wife, and I'm sure he loves his kids, and I'm sure he loves his grandkids. He just doesn't love somebody else's grandkids. All right, we missed fish last Sunday, so if you have a buck or two, go ahead and contribute to fish today. As usual, please contribute if you can. And we're going to hear what?
It's called Prayer by Beethoven.
Prayer by Beethoven. I wrote it down, but I can't find my paper. So. Closing hymn, O Day of Light and Gladness, is 270. extinguishing the chalice, we're using the closing words for Easter by Alex Holt. For all those who celebrate the resurrection of Jesus, may this day be another affirmation of divine love and promise. For all those who see the eternal story of new spring and life beginning anew, may you breathe deeply of a season of promise and hope. For all who are experiencing despair or hopelessness this Easter, may you find in the darkness or depression a doorway to light and warmth that offers you freedom. For all of us, together we can do what no one isolated person can do. Rolling the heavy stone aside reminds us that we are far more powerful than we ever could be on our own. Our offering of strong hands to help, our prayers made real. Let us begin again to love. The postlude is, Glory to God in the Nature by Beethoven. And Beethoven is particularly apt for this. And let me light a little candle. I forgot to mention, Kenny is a great-grandfather for number
15.
Number 15. He's got active genes. All right.
Yeah.
Beethoven is certainly Beethoven, pretty unmistakable. And really, you can tell he was probably raised in the church. Sounds like church music.
He couldn't hear very well either.
What's that?
He had to play loud because he couldn't hear very well.
Yeah, I'm not sure he could hear it all, but he heard it in the inside of his head, and that's where it counts. All right, that closes our service for New Madison First Universalist. Hope you're having a good Easter. Hope you're with your family. Don't eat too much. And maybe just for a moment, think about those people who do not have enough to eat. Next Sunday will be the Holocaust showing after church. You can come for church and stay, or you can come after church just for the showing. We're not particular. We've got plenty of snack-type foods and plenty of community discussion that will be available. Right. Have a good day. Oh, and this is Wyoming. I forget the name of the river. The reason I like the picture was it actually shows a saddle, which usually all you see is the tips of her ears.
Yeah.
Now you can at least see the saddle there. I'm enamored with these pictures all over the world, so I'll keep bringing them to you. I think they're just amazing.
It almost looks like a side saddle.
It's got the saddle horn in the front, so the side saddle has the horn more to the center where you put your leg around it.
Yeah.
And this one has That's not the one that you, that's the kind you wrap a rope around when you're lassoing a calf.
Yeah.
Now the green light drive.
It's still kind of shadowy, it's not the best picture.